All right, joining me now, Mark Claxton, Director of Black Law Enforcement Alliance, served as 20 years as a police officer here in New York City. Reddit Hudson, Chairman and former officer of the St. Louis Police Department. And at the table here, Peter Moskos, former officer of the Baltimore City Police Department. Peter, maybe I'll start with you at your table here. Your reaction to the mayor today, kind of, all eyes have been on him. This relationship has been so fraught. Tensions have been so high in the city. Then you get this news, which is just about the worst news that any commissioner can get, any mayor could get, any family can get, obviously, any citizen can get. Any citizen can get. He today went out and did a number of public appearances. What was your reaction to him today?
I think there was a lot on the line at that press conference. I mean, I was waiting for it. I think a lot of people were. I thought both and the commissioner did a great job. Look, some cops are always going to hate de Blasio. He's liberal, they're not. I don't think there's anything he can do about that. But what he can do is best, and he said the right things today. He seemed sincere. He defended the NYPD. He properly showed respect to the killed officers, and he defended the right of protesters. That's the New York I want to live in.
Mark, you were here for a while, and you were a member of the department during some very, very fraught periods in this department's history. How does right now compare?
Well, I think, those who may not have an understanding of the history of the NYPD, especially as it relates to the mayor and the police unions, this is pretty much par for the course. I think what has exacerbated this situation is the national attention that is surrounding the push for, justice reform. I think that has exacerbated it. But if you examine the police unions and their response to the mayor in '92, which happened to be David Dinkins, when the police department themselves had a riot at City Hall. The police had a riot at City Hall, led by then candidate Rudy Giuliani, the same one who's running his mouth right now. If you look at how they felt about Rudy Giuliani, and even some of the strategies are the same. The using of denial of funeral opportunities for the mayor, suggesting that these things don't hold water, generally speaking. The police will always be the police, and regardless even of what their union may encourage, they know what their obligations are, and they'll continue to do that.
Let me follow up on that, Mark, because it's been striking to me, it's striking to me how intense the rhetoric has been from the police unions across the country in the last 6 months, how intense it's been here in New York, how intense it has been in the wake of these horrific murders. Is there a disconnect between the rank and file of the member? Look, why does the police union behave the way they do? Explain that to me.
There has always been, for my entire time in the police department, and it exists right now, there's always been some level of disconnect from union leadership and the membership. Always has been. But I think what's important here, and why some of at least in New York, why some of the rhetoric has been so heated and so charged and so emotional from Patty Lynch, is because there are some things that haven't been considered or discussed, such as, contract negotiations that are ongoing, and union elections, which are, coming up pretty soon. So there is some backdrop to some of the rhetoric. But I think people have to be mindful that this is not new. Right. And the same level of emotion and passion has existed in every mayoralty that I was exposed to, and some really went far. Like I said, in '92, there was an actual police riot in the steps of City Hall.
And that was the last time we had a liberal mayor and contract negotiations.
That's right. And at Reddit, let me get your reaction to one of the things that Rudy Giuliani, foreign invader, said, which is something that's been echoed by a lot of people, which is basically laying this murder at the feet of protesters, laying it at the feet of critics of the police department. You're someone who worked as a cop in St. Louis, have been a protester, as far as I understand, literally on the streets protesting in Ferguson. I want you to respond to this comment from Rudy Giuliani. Take a listen.
We've had 4 months of propaganda, starting with the president, that everybody should hate the police. I don't care how you want to describe it. That's what those protests are all about. The protests are being embraced. The protests are being encouraged. The protests, even the ones that don't lead to violence, and a lot of them lead to violence, all lead to a conclusion. The police are bad. The police are racist. That is completely wrong.
What's your reaction to that?
I think Rudy Giuliani is ridiculous. Here you have a situation where 2 individuals had their lives taken and their human rights violated by someone who had no regard for either. That is exactly what these protests have been about for over 100 days across the country, and we uniformly condemn this act. For him to associate the protests and the movement with the deaths of these officers who suffered at the hands of an individual who was clearly disturbed. He shot his girlfriend before he came to New York and shot these two officers. It's ridiculous, but it's the kind of thing you expect from a man like Rudy Giuliani, and I'm learning to expect it from the police union head in New York, Mr. Lynch. The politicization of this incident is repugnant to me and to most people who care about what's happening on the ground.
The officers aren't even in the ground yet. Could you imagine what Giuliani would be saying if there were liberals trying to make this a political issue at this point? I mean, really, shame on him. At least have a little respect for the family. The union's not speaking for the Ramos family. Wait a bit. I mean, this is a time for police and the public to come together. It's the only silver lining that comes out of police funerals.
But here's an opportunity from unfortunate circumstances. Here's an opportunity for the public and the police to come together and have a real dialogue about exactly the things that have led us to the dissension that you see and the gap that you see between police and the communities they serve. Mr. Giuliani is incorrect if he believes that there is no factor of race in policing in America, if he believes there is no factor of race throughout our criminal justice system. I've put my life on the line. I've been shot at enforcing the laws of this state in Missouri here. None of that changes the reality on the ground that we have to address the issues that have become the focus of this movement over time.
Here's what's so striking about this moment in time, to me. In 1991, 1992, around Rodney King, you had this crime surge across the country. I mean, murders in New York were 5 times what they were last night, right? You have seen this unprecedented drop in crime. There's almost no social issue that compares to what's happened to violent crime in the U.S. I mean, it's not like carbon emissions have gone down 80% or poverty's dropped by 80% or, you know, and yet the issues, the politics of law and order, the politics of the police unions, the politics of how this stuff plays out, Mark, they don't seem that changed by the fact that the underlying thing that this all is supposedly about, which is crime, has changed enormously in the last 25 years.
Right. Well, I think what it is that people, of course, they want law and order, but they also demand justice, and they firmly believe, the people, we believe, that these things are not mutually exclusive, that you can have effective crime enforcement strategies, you can have effective, law enforcement across this nation and still preserve and protect the sanctity of the justice system. And whenever you find that there is a gap or a lack of justice, then people have an obligation to demand for it and demand transparency and, as they're doing right now, demand reform. Let's get back to center and find out how we can really meld and blend these concepts so people understand these aren't mutually exclusive.
Peter.
I just wish we could fix these greater issues in society without blaming individual police officers. Saying that cops are racist is not going to solve the problems of racial injustice in America. And it also is a lot of the reason why a lot of cops get defensive and say, why are you blaming me for this? There are problems in America, but cops feel, right or wrong, that the anger is being addressed to them individually.
And there was a reation to that I think...
But my issue with that would be...
Please, I don't buy that.
My issue with that would be, why aren't there more officers who... those cops who are racist? The president of my academy class, back in 2008, when Barack Obama was first elected, sent an email. He hit send on an email, unfortunately, that reached people I'm sure he didn't want it to reach, that said he can't believe we live in a nation of N lovers, with about 10 exclamation points behind the actual word. When are these officers who don't want to be called racist going to challenge those who do?
Mark Claxton, Hudson, and Peter Moskos, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. I really, really appreciate that. That is all in for this evening. Rachel Maddow.